It's really hard to say without laughing.
You've been in my computer.
Bork, bork, bork.
Help. You've been in my computer, Froken Salander, he said aloud. You're a fucking hacker.
This is I Don't Even Own a Television, episode number 100. The girl with the dragon tattoo.
1, 2, 3. There are books that are good, there are books that are bad. There's some books so fucking awful you wish you never had read them at all. Cause a novel can ruin your life. Hey buddy, I don't even own a television.
All right, welcome to I Don't Even Own a Television. It's a podcast about bad books. This is the 100th time we're coming to you with a new episode, which is mind-boggling to me. Definitely never thought when I started it was going to last this long and that I've dedicated this much of my life to reading things I didn't want to read. But hey, thanks everyone for supporting us long enough to make it worthwhile to get this far, and hopefully we'll keep going and slowly poisoning our minds. I am J.W. Friedman.
And I'm Chris, the boy with many tattoos but no dragon tattoos collision.
That's true. I also have many tattoos but no dragon tattoos or Chinese symbols on my hip.
Yet.
Yeah, that's coming next. I need to figure out what the Chinese symbol for reluctant reader is. and then I'll be well on my way.
Right.
So sometimes we like to stray off the beaten path, do some kind of weird stuff, do some real obscure genre fiction, but we figured to commemorate this major landmark, we should pick something big that people know about. So we went with this book, which is inspired not one, but two movies in two different languages.
Yeah.
And a slew of sequels, and was written by a guy who died before it was published. So, yeah.
Yeah, kind of like one of the last gasps of the monoculture. This is just one of those books that I remember everybody reading. You'd be on the bus, you'd see two people reading it. You'd go to the bar, you'd see a person reading it. You'd go to the coffee shop, you'd see three people reading it. You would, walk into the bathroom at night. There's inexplicably somebody in your bathroom reading it. Like that, you couldn't go anywhere without seeing these books.
It just randomly appears on your bookshelf.
Yeah. No, I mean, you mentioned like you were traveling and, you're in Cancun and there's like that leave a book, take a book shelf. Uh-huh. And I think it is a legal requirement that all such shelves have one book from this series on them.
Yeah, and the book that I read that I thought was this book, it turns out was actually the sequel, The Girl Who Played with Fire. So I spent most of this week lazing about, being like, I'll just skim over this book again before we start talking about it. And then realized yesterday morning that I had 700 pages to read. And I think this may inform our kind of different emotional responses to this book, because I know Collision had plenty of time to absorb it over the course of a week, whereas I had to jam it into my skull as fast as humanly possible. And I'm angry right now.
Is this why you sent me that text yesterday morning that just said, Swedish chef voice, but sad, bork, bork, bork?
Perhaps. And okay, so before we get too into this, I think everybody in the world knows what this book is about. So you probably also know there's some pretty sensitive topics handled. We're going to talk about them. We're going to try our best not to get too detailed or upsetting about them, but it's a book that revolves heavily around sexual abuse, so be prepared for that, or just don't listen if you don't want to. We don't mind, but we'll try to be respectful and good about that, and just make fun of the funny parts. So, because there are a lot
of which I promise there are many.
It's also worth noting too. I did a little bit of research after this. I guess this book was originally written in Swedish, and it was edited. However, the American version was just a quick rush job translation of the unedited Swedish version that was produced mainly to get an English language version of a book in front of Sony execs so they could decide whether or not they wanted to make an American version of the movie. So what we're talking about here, if you happen to be Swedish or speak Swedish and you've read this book in its original format, you may not recognize some of the things that we're talking about, because I have a feeling a lot of the stuff that we find hilarious was edited out of this book.
Two things. One, Jay, are you saying that a book that includes sentences like Salander fitted into this picture about as well as a buffalo at a boat show might have been a little bit under-edited?
I don't know. I mean, I've been to a lot of boat shows, and the buffaloes are always the highlights.
Yeah. Two, I just want to note, if you are familiar with Swedish pronunciation in any way,
We're
you're also
sorry.
not going to recognize a lot of the content of this, because I'm fitting to butcher every Swedish name and every Swedish word you put in front of me. And I am sorry, mostly because I am sort of Swedish by adoption. It doesn't help. It just doesn't help.
It's just, y'all got an interesting language that's very hard to read on the page and turn into words if you're unfamiliar with it. And I think you'll kind of hear us butcher many names of places and people. And we do apologize in advance. We're going to try our hardest. And I'm going to try my hardest not to do a comedy Swedish accent every time.
Yeah, you should know that we discussed for several hours before recording today whether or not we were both going to do the entire episode in dueling Swedish chef voices. We couldn't really resolve it amicably, so we had a giant fist fight. I lost, and this is how we're talking.
Yeah, sorry guys. Bork, bork, bork. Okay, so yes, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Successful intro to a successful series called the Millennium Trilogy, written by a man, Michael Blomquist, who is mostly known prior to this as
Stieg Larsson. You
How
mentioned
did I make
his self-insert character name instead.
How did I make that mistake? How did I confuse the real-life financial journalist who leans hard to the left and has a vendetta against, corporate entrepreneurs with the fictional journalist who leans hard to the left and has a vendetta against corporate entrepreneurs?
Conundrum.
Yep. No, never before has the protagonist of a book been so obviously like an idealized version of the author, I think. So yes, my mistake. Stieg Larsson is the guy who wrote this. He was the editor and I believe editor-in-chief as well as writer for a magazine called Expo for many years in Sweden, which is really actually known for doing a lot of really good work, kind of exposing a lot of the far right and neo-Nazi movement stuff that was going on in Sweden in the 90s, and actually seems like he's written some pretty interesting nonfiction if you're familiar with his journalistic work. However, ...
Wow, we were really starting to pick up some steam there, and then I feel like we kind of hit a little patch of quicksand.
Well, we did, and it's these books, and we'll get more into their unusual provenance later, but I think right up front we have to try to do the most impossible task I think we've ever set out to do.
I've been freaking out about this for seriously like 3 days.
So before we get into it, let me play the music.
Nobody knows if you're finished or not. You got 60 seconds to give them a plot. Plot in 60 seconds.
Okay, so this is the part of the show, I almost said the part of the book, where we try to sum up the plot of a book in 60 seconds or less, which I am convinced is going to be absolutely impossible. And I kind of came to that conclusion about 30% into the book when I reached a page that is literally a diagram of a wealthy industrialist family's family tree that dates back for several generations.
I have not seen this in a fucking novel since
Tolstoy.
100 Years of Solitude. Yeah, exactly. Like these are the kinds of books that require this. Spoiler, I'm going to skip over all that shit.
Okay.
Or I'm going to skip over the gloss over the details of all that shit.
Well, then you may stand a chance.
Look, the only person who could condense this 600 pages into 60 seconds would be the Micro Machines man on meth, and I am not that guy.
I'm just Micro Machine Man. This is a new, totally terrific, new tremendous series of Micro Machines. Now, real doors and trucks are really open and closed.
Yeah.
Remember, if it doesn't say Micro Machines, it's not the real thing.
Yeah.
All right, cool. That was a good take. And not of the internet hot take variety, because, I mean, we all know the best Micro Machines did not have doors and trunks that really open and close. They were the ones that changed color when you dipped them in water.
Oh, man, those were so, like, what happened to changing colors as just, like, a cool feature?
My guess is one of the chemicals was highly toxic, and they figured it out later, which also explains how I grew up.
Is that why everybody in my generation is completely insane now? It was those fucking hypercolor t-shirts.
It was. Those things rot your brain and turn you into a strange neoliberal capitalist weirdo.
And I guess the others of us who didn't go that way and just turned into virtue signaling weenuses were originally irony poisoned by Big Johnson t-shirts.
Co-ed naked lacrosse, my man.
Rough, tough, and in the buff.
Well, speaking of co-ed and naked, let's get into the details of this book.
Jesus fuck.
Sorry, everyone.
Please rate and review us on iTunes, but not when you're thinking about what just happened.
Yeah. Okay. Let me collect myself here. Okay, Collision, you have 60 seconds to try to do this. Are you ready?
I am ready.
Go.
The back of the book says, Harriet Wenger, a scion of one of Sweden's wealthiest families, disappeared over 40 years ago. All these years later, her aged uncle continues to seek the truth. He hires Mikael Blomqvist, a crusading journalist recently trapped by a libel conviction to investigate. He is aided by the pierced and tattooed punk prodigy Lisbeth Salander. Together, they tap into a vein of iniquity and corruption. That's cheating. That's just the back of the book. So I want to do something strange. I want you to restart the clock.
Okay.
And I want to try my own version.
I'm winding it back.
But I did want the beloved listeners to actually have some fucking semblance of an idea what this book is about. And that actually does a pretty good job. That's
also,
the setup.
The alliteration there on the back is probably some of the best writing in this entire book.
It obviously tripped me up.
Yeah. Okay, let's try this one more time.
Okay.
Here's a rewind sound effect. And now.
Crusading journalist Mikael Blomqvist has just lost a libel case to the powerful Swedish financiers the Wennerström Group, and his magazine Millennium is probably about to go out of business. He's also facing 3 months in a country club prison. A powerful industrialist named Henrik Wenger, however, wants to commission Mikael to write his family's history, but what he really wants is to hire Blomqvist to investigate the 40-year-old disappearance of his beloved niece Harriet Wenger from a little island village called Hedeby. The Wengers are incredibly rich and incredibly vile. Henrik is super nice, but not used to disagreement. His sister is straight out of Flowers in the Attic, and it just fucking goes downhill from there. Meanwhile, we meet Lisbeth Salander, who has been hired to do a background check on Blomqvist. She's 4'11" and 98 pounds, and in case we're likely to forget this, the book reminds us several times of this, usually by having a character, often a female character, reflect, she looks, quote, anorexic. She also has tattoos and piercings, and in case we're likely to forget this, the book reminds us every time she appears that she has tattoos and piercings. Anyway, she is by her own description one of the top 3 hackers in Sweden. She's also a ward of the state and a sassy 25-year-old who doesn't take any shit from anybody. Get this? She'll even sleep with a boy or a girl, depending on what she feels like.
Damn, you're already way over, but keep going.
She also rides a motorcycle and wears black t-shirts.
That's true.
The Wenger clan is a nest of vipers, lots of Nazi Party affiliation. Harriet left a diary with 5 sets of initials next to 5-digit numbers. They appear to be phone numbers, but the phone numbers don't match the initials. Conundrum! Mikael's teen daughter, who we haven't mentioned before and won't mention again, glances at them and says that's Bible code for passages in Leviticus, everybody's favorite book of the Bible, and we're off to the races. Salander finds that there's lots of murdered women in Sweden that have some connection to the Wenger group, and that's actually where I stopped even trying.
Well, that's good, because I think we're now at plot at 180 seconds.
Yeah, 186. We're also, by now, I think something like
45%.
300 pages into this 600-page book. Yeah, so there's a lot going on. I guess the real story, there's 2. There's the framing story, which is about Blomqvist and his attempt to take down this financier named Wennerström, which goes really poorly because Wennerström completely tricks him and fucks him.
Yeah,
right.
He sets him up with a fake informant so that they end up libeling him in press, and then he has to go to court and admit that he's guilty because everything he wrote turns out not to be true.
And that's the first 25 and last 40 pages of the book. And spoiler, Lisbeth basically comes in and dude sex mockingjays everything and completely exposes Wennerström's fraudulent business practices before having him killed by the people he owes money to.
Yeah, let's get into Lisbeth a little bit more. I want to talk about her a little bit more because I find her characterization is so transparently, I feel like, the type of thing that a late 40s man, early 50s man would describe kind of a young punkish girl that he doesn't understand why he's sexually attracted to, but is anyway. And this plays out pretty much every single time she's mentioned, where it's she kind of looked like a boy, but I also really thought she was hot.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's sort of like if your dad walks in and you're watching a Susie Sue video.
Yeah.
Or maybe that weird moment where Kate Bush was dressing like she was in Motley Crue.
Yeah. I mean, you're going there. I was thinking short hair Miley Cyrus because I'm creepier than you, I guess.
Also, I'm extremely old.
Yeah, but this is one of my favorite, just brief, because this book is just filled with wonderful one-paragraph descriptions of Lisbeth's appearance. And one of them is, sometimes she wore black lipstick, and in spite of the tattoos and the pierced nose and eyebrows, she was, well, attractive. It was inexplicable.
Oh, Dad, just, you're trying, but also you're a very trying person.
Yeah. So there's just tons of that. There's a lot of great descriptions about, what kind of denim skirt she's wearing, what kind of boot she's wearing, what black t-shirt she's wearing, things like this.
There's also this really funny scene where, so she's introduced to us because the Vangers have hired the company she freelances for to run a background check on Blomqvist to see if he's reliable to come in and do this like weird research job. And
let's be fair too. The research job is very much just kind of the cover story to get him to try to dig into this murder mystery.
Right. It's basically a great way for a journalist who knows a lot about being a journalist to write a private investigator.
Yeah,
where
exactly.
he just like makes up a journalist who someone hires to be a private investigator.
That's exactly what happens. Yeah.
And later on, I will prove to you that is what happened because I did my homework. Anyway, Blomqvist somehow gets his hands on this dossier that Salander has produced on him, flips out, uses his own journalistic skills to find out where she lives, and goes to her house and like is walking around and like there's clothes piled everywhere. She hasn't taken her milk cartons out, and her kitchen is dirty. And he's like, I've just never seen anything like this. She's a 25-year-old.
Yeah.
I've been in the apartments of 25-year-olds.
Not only that, she is a 25-year-old who is very clearly described as a punk rocker who hangs out with a group of people that call themselves the Evil Fingers. It's like, have you ever been inside a house with a name? Yeah. Like a punk house that a lot of people live at, like Future House or the Utility House? It's like, none of those people do dishes. Let's be real.
Yeah, so
I didn't learn how to do dishes until I was like 30.
Some people think I still haven't learned how to do dishes. Love you, honey.
I'm sorry. I had forgotten about Evil Fingers until the words came out of my mouth, which is one of my favorite parts.
Actually, let's. It might be time for high points, low points, because it's safe to say that Evil Fingers was definitely a moment that made me write literally "excuse me" in my notebook.
Okay, yeah, let's go ahead. I mean, I'm sure we're going to digress a bunch throughout this because there's just too much to talk about here. But let's try to keep some semblance of structure in place. Unlike this novel, Waka Waka. So here's some high points and some low points.
High points are high, and low points are low. High points, low points, get ready to go.
High points. Okay. I guess I'll go first. And that one of my favorite things about this book is, as I mentioned earlier, it basically contains what I would describe as, and forgive me for adapting a term that is now very much out of favor, a manic pixie dream hacker. She is a small, waifish woman who comes into men's lives and saves them, and then inexplicably has consequence-free sex with them, and then disappears in the wind. And this book is filled with men in their 40s and 50s trying to impress her in really, really unfortunate ways. And one of my favorites is when her boss sees her at a cafe with her friends, who we previously mentioned, Evil Fingers, and is trying to figure out how he could endear herself to her, but not in a creepy way. And it says, Armansky, that's her boss, Armansky wondered how she would react if one day he came to work with green hair, worn-out jeans, and a leather jacket covered with graffiti and rivets.
Don't do it, bro.
She would probably just smirk at him. Yep. Then she would probably quit.
Yep.
But it's just filled with little like nuggets like that of grown-ass men being like, how could I impress this 25-year-old punk rocker?
Yeah.
And to me, I'm a man, I'm not a woman, but I was a 25-year-old punk rocker, and the thought that there were maybe ever people who were fully grown up wondering how they would impress me, that makes me feel a little better about my life. Somebody out there found me an aspirational figure, even when I was wearing an Assuck t-shirt and jeans with holes that went from like the knee to the shin. So.
IDEOTV, the podcast that sets the bar.
Yeah, we're real good literature guys.
We're aspirational figures to very sad people.
Yeah.
That's a good high point. My high point is actually probably only a few pages away from that, which is the following little passage that you hinted at. Salander was not the easiest person to be friends with, and especially not during those years. But Scylla ignored her silences and took her along to the bar. Through Scylla, she had become a member of Evil Fingers, which had started as a suburban band consisting of 4 teenage girls in Enskede who were into hard rock. 10 years later, they were a group of friends who met at Kvarnen on Tuesday nights to talk trash about boys and discuss feminism, the pentagram, music, and politics while they drank large quantities of beer. They also lived up to their name.
What does that mean? Are they implying?
Don't make me say it.
Okay. Oh, see, I was thinking like pickpocketing or something, but you've just opened a whole new door on this character, my friend.
That was when I wrote, "Excuse me."
Okay, there's nothing evil about that.
Yeah, sometimes Stieg Larsson's nice guy mask slips a little bit, and he spends maybe a little too much time thinking about the habits of younger ladies.
A little, you say.
This is what I say.
Okay, you're wrong. I have a feeling he spends quite a bit of time thinking about that, and it shines through in this text excruciatingly. But yeah, anyway, we'll get into that more, I guess, when we get to low points, which is now. So I guess, yeah, I'll roll right into this. Like, one of my low points in this book is everything to do with women. Because, like, this is a guy who, the author, I guess, in real life was pretty dedicated to a lot of political feminist causes and, leaned very hard to the left. And actually seems like he did a lot of good in the world, in the real world. But this book almost feels like an extended back-patting session because he's written this character who is essentially like, he has sex with so many women, but he never makes the first move. They just climb into bed with him. I mean, it's never like really described that he takes any initiative or agency whatsoever and is just kind of, used by a procession of women in a way. Well, so and it's weird.
When Salander decides that she wants to sleep with him, his 2 comments about this are, first, I don't think this is a good idea. We work together.
Yeah.
And second, I don't have a condom. And like, for me, it was kind of hard to be mad at a book where that happens.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, that's actually, not that unreasonable a set of responses. But
then they have sex anyway.
Yeah.
And I mean, it should be mentioned that we're first kind of introduced to him as being part of a polyamorous relationship. Right. In case you didn't realize, he's very sexually progressive, and all this kind of stuff. And I don't find anything wrong with any of that. But what I do kind of find weird about it is that it's like intercut with some of the most like graphic depictions of sexual abuse that I've ever seen. And sometimes like we're literally jumping back and forth between a scene of sexual assault to a scene of consensual sex, like almost like a hard cut in a movie, and it makes the whole thing feel skeezy. And I don't know how to put it other than that, but there's something really weird about kind of this book taking this very kind of self-congratulatory tone of feminism and then really reveling in scenes of women being abused. I didn't like that at all. And I can't think of any other way to put it than that, and there's not really any way to make that funny, so let's just move on.
Let's talk about the pros.
Okay.
I actually have a little trouble knowing whether or not I can call this a bad book, and you've put a lot on my radar about the methods of its construction and translation that make me even less confident in what I'm about to say, but I don't give a shit. This thing was published. People were charged money for it. It was at the library by my house.
And so, a smash bestseller.
Yeah, so I have no compunction saying it is a badly written book, whether or not it's a bad book.
Yeah.
And I'm going to read you a paragraph that I think kind of demonstrates that and blends together a lot of the threads that you were just talking about in terms of a kind of queasy paternalism present, a certain shelteredness on the part of the author, perhaps, etc. It goes like this. He couldn't figure out Lisbeth Salander. She was altogether odd. Long pauses in the middle of the conversation. Her apartment was messy, bordering on chaotic. Bags filled with newspapers in the hall. A kitchen that had not been cleaned or tidied in years. Clothes were scattered in heaps on the floor. She had obviously spent half the night in a bar. She had love bites on her neck, and she had clearly had company overnight. She had heaven knows how many tattoos and 2 piercings on her face, and maybe in other places. She was weird. This is the only paragraph in history that includes she was altogether odd and she was weird.
Yep, those are 2 sentences that mean the same thing. It's like, that's like high school essay writing style right there. It's like, make sure to rephrase your point at the end.
Yeah. So that paragraph was like, and that's page 342. So, like I've had a lot of time with both of these characters, and to have one reflecting on the other in fucking crayon like that was just very, very tiring.
Yeah, by this point you've already like read detailed descriptions of at least 6 different outfits that Lisbeth had worn. She owns a motorcycle. You've heard all about her kind of tortured past that includes being taken advantage of by a number of people who were essentially placed in charge of her as a ward of the state, that she's deemed unfit to take care of herself, yada yada. But yeah, you still need this fucking, as you put it, like a crayon portrait of how weird she is. Yeah, come on. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, this was apparently translated from the unedited version, and one of the biggest clues about that, I feel like, is there's a quote from the guy who edited the Swedish version where he said, "We took out about 20 pages at the front of the book that's literally just describing a flower. And when you open the English version, what do you get? 20 pages describing a fucking flower." So I don't know if we're reading the original article, but we're still reading the book that flew to the top of the New York Times bestseller list and stayed there for God knows how long. So yeah, I do agree. It may not be a bad book, but this particular version is very poorly written. Yeah. Okay. I guess more low points for me.
Hell yeah.
All right. This, once again, it kind of just comes back to the same weird old dudeness of a lot of it. And just kind of a complete misunderstanding of how things work when you're not a middle-aged man. And once again, kind of ties back to our author's weird relationship with feminism. And I feel like I'm going to get hate mail from both sides on this for misunderstanding it or something, but I don't care. This really bugged me because it reminds me of a lot of criticism of things I've read recently on the internet that also made me furious. He sat on the kitchen bench and tried to read a novel which, according to the back cover text, was the sensational debut of a teenage feminist. The novel was about the author's attempt to get a handle on her sex life during a trip to Paris, and Blomqvist wondered if he could be called a feminist if he wrote a novel about his own sex life in the voice of a high school student. Probably not. He had bought the book because the publisher had heralded the first-time novelist as a new Karina Rydberg. He quickly ascertained that this was not the case in either style or content. He put the book aside for a while and instead read a Hopalong Cassidy story. I mean, this is what people are saying about cat people like 2 weeks ago.
That's a weird, like, axe grindy thing. That's actually one of the funnier parts of this book is like, okay, so this drops several names in the space of a fairly short paragraph, none of whom have any American resonance.
Yeah.
So that to me is actual. I remember that passage. That struck me as funny. But the content of it is, like this is the stuff you leave out of the draft you turn in.
Yeah, I mean it's a middle-aged man like condescending to women about what their feminism should manifest as, and that kind of bugs the shit out of me and yada yada. I mean, just a lot of the book. I guess you mentioned the sheltered nature of the author, and I don't want to say sheltered in all aspects. Like, this is a man who had his life threatened by neo-Nazi groups like several times in real life and stuff, but he just seems to have like a very weird perception of young women in general, and it comes through a lot in this book, and it's weird. And yeah, I just don't like that condescending, patronizing tone. I've realized I kind of made the same low point twice in a row, though, so I'm going to go back to my fallback low point here, which is just this book gets so hung up in the minutia of the things that the author is interested in and familiar with. Like, for instance, say, financial journalism. Yeah, this is the kind of stuff that you encounter in this book a lot is... It was by far the biggest bubble to burst on the Swedish financial world since the Kruger crash of 1932. The Wennerström affair made all the Gotha Bank imbroglios and truster frauds pale in comparison. There was fraud on such a grand scale that no one even dared to speculate on how many laws had been broken. So, I mean, that's one thing here. We talked earlier about how he's basically set up to write a libelous piece. And the way this starts is he meets an old college friend on a boat. And this friend describes to him in great detail kind of the machinations and double dealings of Wennerström, our industrialist fucking villain. I counted. It's a literal 12-page monologue from one character delivered about dirty dealing in the Swedish public sector. And, I mean, it reaches John Galt levels of just like, when is this going to fucking stop? So, yeah, he has a real habit of kind of veering hard into what I'm sure to him is fascinating kind of, financial minutia, but to everybody else on the planet just feels like what if, you're reading a modern American mystery and then they decided to, talk about Goldman Sachs for 30 pages.
And if you thought that info dump was a little tiresome, wait till you get to the embedded story about the Wangers, because Henrik Wanger does this exact same monologuing thing with chapter breaks, but I think it's maybe 3 or 4 times as long.
Oh, and it's even set up to the point where basically he has now manipulated our hero Blomquist to come visit him on an island and made it so there's no way that he can essentially leave without listening to this monologue, which he even prefaces by saying, this is going to take me a really long time to describe, and I have to tell it to you in 2 parts, and you won't understand the second part till you hear the first part. And then, it goes on for like 40 pages.
There's literally an interruption where he's like, I'm sorry, this isn't making sense. And Wanger says something like, don't ask questions, I have to tell this in chronological order. Like, wait, what?
Yeah. And I mean, this is the time where you're literally...
Cut to the chase, brother.
Yeah. You're literally just reading it. Then so-and-so bequeathed the company to so-and-so, who bequeathed part of the company to so-and-so. And it begins to feel almost biblical in scope, where you're just talking about a historical lineage of a fucking corporation.
This is amazing. Here's an exchange. Do you know anything about the old inheritance laws? Wanger had asked. No. I'm confused about it, too.
Jesus. Nope. I only know about companies and the shit they do.
So I sort of mentioned this, like there's this, the bulk of the book is Blomqvist investigating the disappearance of Harriet Wanger. And you've got these like cartoonishly evil Wangers.
One of them who is Cruella de Vil, by the way. You mentioned straight out of Flowers in the Attic, but like she's described as wearing a big stole and having a streak in her hair.
Right.
Like she is a 101 Dalmatians villain who pokes people with her cane to make a point.
Yeah. But all of it is basically him wallowing in these details and not getting anywhere at all for many, many pages. And I finally realized what it's like is watching someone watch a soap opera.
Ooh, yeah.
Because it's like sex and intrigue and who's controlling the company and, who's sexually abusing who and why does nobody ever get divorced and why is this one, in this country and this one in this country. But none of it actually ends up mattering at all. It's all this giant, like, I guess it's not a red herring because we're in Sweden. I guess it's a pickled herring.
Yeah, man, and they eat a lot of herring in this book.
Oh my God, it's so much herring
and lingonberry everywhere.
Yeah, there's from hell to breakfast, and sometimes for breakfast.
That's true.
So yeah, it was weirdly superfluous in a way, and like a lot of the narrative tension is he was worried. Because I'm telling you, he was worried. There just doesn't feel like any real stakes.
Well, I think you brought up a good point when you mentioned soap operas, right? Because soap operas are written to, never really conclude. They're supposed to go on forever. So there is a lot of drama with very little stakes because it just exists to move from one plot beat to the next so they can kind of sustain this infinite momentum. This book feels like that at times, but it's a book. It's supposed to end.
Yeah, it's supposed to end someday.
Since apparently episode 100 is all about Jay courting controversy, I'm going to say that some of it to me feels like there's a television show I loved the first couple seasons of, The Venture Brothers, and then they did a couple more seasons more recently that just bored me to tears. And when I was watching it, I realized it's because I felt like I was reading a Wikipedia article about the television show The Venture Brothers instead of actually watching it, because they would delve so deeply into the backstories of all these side characters. And that's kind of where this goes. Like, this is a 600 and some, like almost 700 page book. Like, we went way above our usual limit, and the story of this book could easily be told in less than 300 if you just kind of cut out all of these superfluous, kind of character portraits of people you don't really need to know about.
I mean, not by me, obviously, but yeah, one could have dealt with the plot in this book more succinctly than either Stieg Larsson or I did.
Yeah. So I guess this brings me to my high point. My second high point was just that, and I think a lot of this has to do with Stieg Larsson's personal past that I was unaware of, is just I had no idea kind of about a lot of the history of Sweden during World War II.
You fucking know about it now, buddy.
I really didn't realize there was such a strong Nazi presence in Sweden. I didn't realize there was such a strong neo-Nazi presence in Sweden, like up until relatively recent times. There's actually like quite a lot of interesting historical detail about that era that I found kind of fascinating. And, if you're a fan of that kind of historical stuff, there's actually some decent little like tidbits buried in here. Although, once again, they're presented in massive info dump form, almost exclusively by Henrik, our old industrialist character who's hired Blomqvist to write this thing. But yeah, I learned a lot for sure about just kind of the Nazis' relationship with Sweden and kind of Sweden's relationship with Hitler and things like that. And I found that kind of fascinating because at least in America, you kind of think of Nazism as an exclusively German thing. You don't hear too much about how it kind of spread to other parts of Europe. And like, it is kind of fascinating, I felt like, to kind of read about how that mentality can infect people like even outside of the realm of the charismatic leader or whatever, so I liked that part for very dry and academic reasons, but I thought it was cool.
Even if it was presented as, what was your brother Stan like? On the 3rd of March 1939, tanks massed at the border of...
It is, and there are also several characters in this book that are described as being good guys who just joined the Nazi party so they could get ahead in their career, which, I'm not super sympathetic to that particular viewpoint, but, hey, what the hell? The historical detail I did find interesting, although several times it made me wish I was just reading a nonfiction book about Sweden in the 1940s.
Yeah. My high point is as in-depth and serious as yours by far. And my high point is that this book is, in my edition, 590 pages.
How is yours 100 pages shorter than mine?
Big pages.
Ah, okay. Yeah. You're right. Oh, yeah, it's tall. You have a tall copy.
Yeah.
It's a long, tall piece of trash.
And I would say that roughly 25 times in this book, Mr. Mikhail Blomqvist pauses for coffee and sandwiches. And I found that so relentlessly endearing.
Oh,
I like coffee and sandwiches too.
He is a man who loves his sandwiches.
He actually drinks so much coffee because he's out and about doing journalism stuff, doing investigatory stuff, and he has to go to a bunch of people's houses and they all give him coffee, and he actually starts grumbling about it. But he's like, I've come to learn that here in the North, it's rude to refuse coffee when you get to someone's house.
Which apparently it's offhandedly mentioned that the traditional way of making Swedish coffee is to boil it in a pan.
I think that was a joke. I think it just means, the traditional way of making coffee, i.e. really shitty coffee.
Gotcha. I was thinking there was some new world of coffee preparation that was fixing to take the high-end barista world by storm.
I mean, I can say that because my dad...
Jackson, if you're listening, let us know.
Yeah, exactly. Please let us know. My dad used to make coffee every morning by means of Folgers crystals into a saucepan of water.
Okay. Yeah, so this may be a cultural reference that just flew right over my head then.
But, anyway,
He loves sandwiches.
Loves fucking sandwiches, and only about like 1 in 8 of those sandwiches is described with respect to ingredients, and it's usually some combination of like rye bread, maybe some egg, some pickle, sometimes cheese, never a specific kind of cheese, just cheese.
Yeah.
Frequently pickled herring, maybe some other stuff here and there.
There is a point in this book that offended me greatly, and once again, second book in a row that we've read, by the way, where our hero just shows up at a woman's house unannounced without her knowing that he exists and becomes friends with her as a result of that, which is still creepy to me. But this time he does it while bringing bagels, which I was like, oh yeah, bagels. I love bagels. Yeah. And then he said, one is roast beef, one is turkey. What the fuck are you doing, dude?
He's bringing bagel sandwiches.
Yeah, none of that shit.
Everyone likes.
None of that shit belongs on a bagel.
Oh, give me a fucking break.
The Gentiles need to stay out of the bagel game, especially if they have this kind of Nazi history. That's all I'm saying. Onion bagels with locks.
I don't even eat meat. Let the man bagel how he wants. Just
Okay.
let him live, Jay.
I'm a bagel prescriptivist. I'm sorry. It's cultural appropriation, man.
Can I say bagel Nazi without getting kicked off the internet, or is that just?
I don't know. It's such a conundrum that I think people's heads will explode before they realize they can get mad about it.
Conundrum.
Speaking of conundrums, we're kind of out of high points and low points. I don't really want to go to break just yet, though, because I still have a bunch of stuff that we haven't talked about.
Let's go deeper.
All right, let's go deeper.
We can either go deeper, or we can take a break for sandwiches and bagels with roast beef on them. And I know you don't want to do that.
I don't, but you know what? It's episode 100, so why don't we do 4 segments?
What?
Let's take a break and come back.
Kicking it old school.
All of this has happened before, and it will all happen again.
All right, we're back, and we're gonna do something we haven't done in quite a while here, which is me getting really angry and Collision trying to rein me back in. But before we do, there are a few lighthearted things I wanted to discuss here.
Let's be clear. I'm not going to be getting mad at Jay and trying to rein him in when he's like, graphic descriptions of sexual violence are bad. I'm not going to be like, whoa.
Yeah.
I think we need to hear both sides.
No, not like that. Just more, I know I have a tendency to get a little agitated and talk in circles for long periods of time. And it's up to you, my friend, to go, you've already said that 3 different ways. You can stop now. So, yeah, put on your editor's hat. Borrow it from whoever, left it in the subway on their way to their job to edit this fucking thing.
Yeah, dear editor at Black Lizard, who originally pushed this out, like, please write us if you're listening and tell us about the illness that struck you down the week you should have been doing your job around this one.
Yes, 700 pages does seem like a great length for a pot boiler. I will say just my very first note in this, and I think I ran across this like within 30 pages of the book, is that this is a really, really good book if you want to read a 5-page description of someone copying a CD-ROM, because that happens.
Oh my God. So many times. That's actually kind of a supplemental high point for me, is there's a childlike enthusiasm about technology, or at least about certain kinds of technology, that absolutely suffuses this book. Like, there's a conversation where he's going into the archives of the newspaper. Right?
Oh, and yeah, I remember this part.
He's talking to, the night editor or something, and the night editor is like, have you ever used a negative scanner before? And Blomqvist kind of gets a little puffy and is like, I have an Arga scanner. I work in Photoshop.
Yeah, and it's double capitalized, camel case Photoshop.
And the guy says...
Which, by the way, completely against Adobe's style guide. But anyway.
And the guy then just says, then you use the same stuff we do, which is kind of like the nerd version of that scene in a Western where two gunfighters will kind of like nod at each other because they recognize each other as like
a Remington
members
bolt action.
members of the tribe. And it's just one of, I've also just never seen like, okay, so is the period supposed to indicate that he said neg scanner instead of negative scanner because like that's what the true pros do?
That's my guess.
Or was it just like it's an artifact of an under-edited manuscript?
Or it could be that. I mean, I think in a lot of ways it makes sense when you think about the fact that Stieg Larsson is a journalist that, from what I can understand, kind of got his start in the early 90s, so was kind of part of this huge transition to digital. So I could see why he was super excited about things like the ability to make a slideshow of images. But boy, he wants to describe that to you in great detail.
But if you really read carefully, which I absolutely don't recommend, you will find things like, spoiler, he really likes Macs, and we'll get into this more later.
Oh yeah, we will.
But the main bad guy in the piece, Wennerstrom, has his computer literally taken away from him one point, and it's like every computer that's been described until that point, you get multiple paragraphs of specs.
Yes, we're not exaggerating.
Wennerstrom has, quote, a Dell.
Yeah, dude, he got a Dell.
And it's like you can just feel the contempt dripping off of like,
look at this captain of industry and his shitty desktop PC that doesn't even fold up and fit in a rucksack. But it's okay. So I'm going to get a little serious here then, though. The problem here is that our author is incapable of shifting tones. So he's doing these hyper detailed descriptions of technological goings on and things like that. And then he applies that same sort of literary technique to talking about like horrific events. And so you're talking about people being tortured and assaulted and stuff. And it's still presented in the same kind of dispassionate, hyper focused way that he uses when he's talking about copying a CD-ROM. And it made my stomach churn. I didn't like that. And I don't feel like that was an intentional choice. It's a lot of this book reminded me of Bret Easton Ellis without self-awareness, which is like pretty crazy to say in and of itself. But there is just kind of this hyper focus on detail that sometimes it's like, dude, you could have pulled back the camera a little bit here and we would have got just as much of it,
I think it's safe to say that, on a prose level, sentence by sentence, Stieg Larsson is not like a naturally good writer.
I think that's fair.
And a lot of this could have benefited a lot from a second pass. Like the book, I think, is actually kind of interestingly structured, with one major exception, which is that the climax of the book happens with roughly 200 pages left in the runtime. That was a decision that maybe could have been rethought a little bit.
Yeah, because at the heart of it, we have a murder mystery, and I read this digitally. You read a paperback, and the digital version, I noticed the mystery is solved at 80% of the book.
Yeah.
So you have 20% of just people tying up the loose ends of kind of the financial circumstances surrounding it. And you go from your pot boiler kind of mystery into, once again, just like these long, drawn-out monologues about how financial corruption works on a very like mechanical level.
I think that's a great word for it, is mechanical, because he is very interested in and fairly good at like the mechanics of crime, the mechanics of computers, the mechanics of research, the mechanics of sandwiches, as I've discussed a couple times.
Very true.
It is interesting to me, though, that he will do these super deep dives into the iBook that he uses as opposed to the PowerBook that Lisbeth Salander uses. But
and remember the times when we still had iBooks and PowerBooks, by the way?
But the scene where he is taken captive in the main evil Vanger's, murder dungeon.
He has a dungeon.
Yeah. That scene takes, honestly, about 4 or 5 pages.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's 2 very awful rapes of Lisbeth Salander in the course of the book.
Yeah.
That altogether, I think, add up to 4 or 5 pages. And yet there will be 4 pages of him dinking around in the archives, or 4 pages of her crafting a search query to use on Google. And it's in one way, it's kind of interesting, but in the other way, I agree with you. It is a complete failure and just desperately in need of editing and revision.
Well, it fucks up the tone. And I mean, this is something I want to get into a little bit, and this is a little difficult to talk about without getting, I'm not going to get graphic here or anything, but I am going to say that like this book is split into chapters, and every single one of the chapters has kind of a subheader that's literally just a statistic about sexual assault against women in Sweden, like X number of % of women have been assaulted by men, per year since this time or something like that. And the problem is that like this book doesn't have anywhere near the gravitas that it should have in order to pull that off and feel earned. And it really struck me as kind of upsetting, like because he's talking about very, very real life things that happen to people and ruin lives and are horrible events. But then when they're portrayed in the book, they're portrayed in like almost this cartoonishly villainous way that's really hard for me to get my head around. It's like, what are you trying to accomplish here, Mr. Larson? And that kind of bugged me, I guess.
Yes, I mean, okay. I don't dispute your right to that response.
All right.
At all. Yes, it's like he's trying to dramatize something.
Yeah, but I mean, in a silly way.
Well, he's not a gifted writer.
Okay, that's fair.
Like, and I do think like a chunk of this is complete speculation, but like we know this guy's a journalist. He shows his fucking footnotes, like you said, like the section headings have statistics about, violence against women. The original title of this like 12,000 pages or whatever he dumped on his publisher was Men Who Hate Women.
Yeah.
Right. If you look at it as a kind of almost a didactic work,
okay,
maybe it's him saying, look, I have to crank everything up to 10 just to make you realize this is a problem. Again, I think it is unearned. I don't think it's well done, but I think it's pretty clear that at some point, journalist Stieg Larsson discovers how many women in Sweden go missing every year.
Yeah.
It's obvious that he reads a lot of mystery novels and is like, I bet I could get a novel that would actually publicize this important issue. And then he runs into his own limitations.
I mean, that's the problem to me, right? Is that you're talking about something that like, I don't want to use the word banal because that's really kind of insulting, but you're talking about something that's very commonplace and kind of part of the fabric of real life for a lot of people, and it's something that affects a lot of people in real life situations. And the way it's presented in this book is like a family of evil neo-Nazis with a dungeon, and like it's so hard for me to kind of rectify those two things that it felt insulting in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, because all of this is taking place in like what we described earlier, right? Because there's also like this weird framing story about a financial journalist, which is not perhaps the most interesting thing to most people.
Yeah.
Even though it's, obviously of some great importance, whether or not our millionaires and billionaires are, as this character was, running drugs and guns.
Literally a gangster, as he's described.
And then the internal story, like the embedded story, is supposed to be about this, like, massive, important, terrifying thing, but it plays out like I said, like watching someone watch a soap opera.
Yeah, to me, I think it's the juxtaposition between real world villainy and like kind of cartoon villainy that makes it hard for me to swallow. And I guess that's about all I really need to say about it. But
I'm guessing you're not a giant SVU fan either.
No. I mean, it's my least favorite of all the Law and Orders, except for Ice-T, who, I mean, everything he does is magic. So much like the police have said.
Yeah, the original version of that was, in fact, everything Ice does is magic. Everything he does just turns me on.
I mean, it's true, especially when he's talking to Detective Munch and just putting him in his place.
Munch, you weird conspiracy theorist dork.
But, I mean, yeah, just to kind of tie this up, I mean, just last week we talked about The Naturalist, or last episode, which is a book about a man in a bear hunter costume, or in a bear costume, running around through the woods, serial murdering people. And I feel like the equivalent would have been if every chapter in that started with, say, a little epithet about the amount of people who die in hunting accidents. Where it's like you're taking real life and then you're applying it to this silly bullshit, and it's frustrating to me.
Yeah, a lot of this book does feel like the very serious voiceover that comes in at a couple of my favorite more ridiculous metal songs. We're talking about
yeah.
We're talking about Ice-T right now, so that's right, it's been a little long. It's time for another body count moment.
The world is having a body count moment right now, so this is right on point.
There's this great moment on the first body count record that just starts with lots of squealing guitar noise and Ice-T saying, "At this moment, there are more black men in prison than in college." And then it goes into a song called Bowels of the Devil, which is about how prison is bad.
Yeah, and I see exactly what you're saying.
And that's kind of this book.
Yeah, it is. You're right. There's a very valid, serious point made, and then kind of turned into something silly and over the top that's hard to take seriously. I'm reminded of the rap metal band Downset from the 1990s, who had a song about the Rodney King riots and the incident that literally just starts out with a white guy saying, "Anger, hostility towards the opposition. Anger, hostility towards the opposition," over and over again, and getting progressively louder. And then by the end, they're yelling, "April 29th, Florence and Normandy." And it's like, you're talking about a real thing. And it's a real serious thing that I should be upset about. But the way you're talking about it makes it impossible to take seriously. I don't know.
In conclusion, kids, try not to get all of your politics off of something scribbled in the insert to a 7-inch, unless you want to turn into me.
Yeah, or me, which, neither I mean, unless you really want to spend 100 episodes talking about bad books, it's maybe not the path you want to take in life. But to kind of back away from that and get into a little less serious stuff, I do want to mention the fact that this is a book where no less than 3 characters throughout maybe the first 300 or 400 pages of this literally lampshade the fact that we have what is a locked door mystery, because it takes place on an isolated island. This girl disappears at a time when the bridge to the island has been made inaccessible due to a traffic accident. So there's a grand total of maybe 64 people who could be capable of this disappearance of this girl. And really, it does kind of fall into that parlor room mystery mode. And people throughout the book refer to this as a locked room mystery several times.
It is literally the case that one character interrupts another and says, "I've read my Dorothy Sayers."
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Just to cut down the level of exposition. And stop and think for a second about whether or not the level of exposition in this book was in general cut down, when even the author of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is having characters jump in to sassily say, "Cut it short." They're making the rapid.
Yeah, exactly. But what bugs the shit out of me, right, is right before we kind of discover the big reveal of the mystery, we have another character in the book run in and just take this carefully placed lampshade and tear it off by saying, I believe this is a direct quote, "This isn't some sort of locked room mystery in a book." Boom! Y'all, you just said 3 times in a book that this is a locked room mystery.
I actually laughed out loud at that moment. Like, that fucking killed me. Like, that's a supplemental high point for me, actually. Like, I kind of like that. That's sort of like, Indiana Jones pulling out his gun to short circuit a sword fight.
Yeah,
that's Eminem saying this is no movie. There's no Mekhi Phifer in a song about a movie starring Mekhi Phifer.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
I mean, I guess if it were written by someone more competent, and I mean, admittedly, like I just. A few episodes ago, I was praising Magpie Murders, which essentially does the same thing, but it's written in a clever enough way where I feel like they could get away with it. Whereas this, it's just more like, couldn't really figure out a way to tie up this mystery in the way I thought I was going to, so I might as well have a character just abandon that entire pretense.
I mean, we're just talking here. It's not like this is some sort of podcast.
Yeah.
Slow turn toward the camera for the live stream. Look,
which actually exists, by the way.
Yeah. If you don't know about it, sucks to be you.
You're just not giving us enough money on Patreon. It's a secret tier.
It's a platinum tier.
Yeah.
We should actually maybe spend some time on that. Among the glories of this book...
I'm creating a secret platinum tier on Patreon. I agree 100% because I still don't have a job.
No, we should spend a little time on the structure of this book and its status as a rippingly constructed and airtight mystery novel. we're not quite to games yet, but let me just say that one of the games I thought about and then discarded as requiring too much work on my part was going to be to ask you what your favorite narrative shortcut, probably provided by Elizabeth Salander, was in this book, because she is a walking narrative get out of jail free card.
Oh yeah, because she can do anything. She's fucking magical. She invents technology that doesn't exist.
Yep.
She has hacker friends who can invent technology that doesn't exist. Yeah, wow. I mean, I think for me, it's definitely at some point she has a friend of hers create a magical bracelet that every time she's wearing it, she can tap into people's computers.
Like, I thought that was, I did, yeah, it's described as a cuff. So I assumed that it was supposed to go over like the modem cords to the dude's laptop.
But how did she get into his house? She didn't even know where he lived.
Well, so that didn't happen on screen. So that was a little bit of a head scratcher to me. So I guess we're supposed to think it's a metaphorical cuff.
Oh, I was thinking of like an Apple Watch kind of situation.
Right. I guess maybe for Elizabeth Salander, it's always cuffing season.
That's true. It could be.
That's a joke for a different 4 people than my usual 4-person joke.
But, you know, since you're talking about this tightly structured murder mystery, I think it is worth mentioning. I don't know if I think we have mentioned this already, but just once again, that the actual mystery part of this book ends at 80%.
Yeah. And
then we spend a lot of time wrapping up financial details. And it's at that point that it's essentially revealed, oh my gosh, guys, are you ready for the huge surprise? The socially inept woman, Lisbeth Salander, who has magical powers of insight and a photographic memory, and who, by the way, had never played chess in her life, but has never lost a game, because that's how chess works.
Uncanny ability to recognize patterns.
Yeah, so turns out she has some kind of spectrum disorder, and that gives her magical powers, which I was complaining about earlier. You mentioned this book may actually be kind of the progenitor of that cliche.
Yeah.
You know, because since then there have been entire TV shows about this. It never stops being insulting. But yeah, Jesus Christ. And they reveal this at about 85% into the book.
I mean, it's a tiny, tiny bit more subtle than that, because the actual Asperger's syndrome or something similar phrase is Blomkvist musing to himself. So it's possible he doesn't really know what the fuck he's talking about.
Yeah.
Right. It's not like the author necessarily endorsing this. But it is definitely spectrum disorder as superpower in a way that has become very tired, and probably was to everyone with personal insight and stake in the game tired from the very fucking beginning.
I was going to say, it's probably has recently become tired to us with more neurotypical outlooks, but I'm sure if this is something you've lived with, you were sick of this long before it appeared in this book. And it's just like, wow, surprise. You know, you figured out this person that relates to the world in an entirely different way than you do, maybe capable of recognizing things that you don't, but it's presented as magical.
It's also, there's a very tiresome thing at the end where part of it I actually find quite actually moving. There, I fucking said it. I have feelings. I'm okay with that. I'm not defensive at all.
My only feeling about this book is anger, so I'm proud of you for rising above that.
But there's this like really gross turn where she decides like, oh wow, I think I actually like this guy. She cleans her apartment, you know, and it's this extremely tired, like, I'm sure that, you know, by book 3, she's not dyeing her hair anymore and has like taken her piercings out or something, you know, because she's been like redeemed by a love of a square man.
That is exactly, that part did make me groan. She's described as throwing out all the trash in her kitchen and straightening her life up and all this kind of stuff, and it's like
she's not depressed anymore.
Yeah, it's like, yay, she's become a totally different person, and like, ugh.
Although there's also a tiny hint that like Blomkvist has been completely wrecked by his experience, you know, sort of getting tortured and nearly killed in the murder dungeon. But very little is done with it. Basically, they describe like, well, he's lost a lot of weight, looks tired all the time now. So maybe, I don't know, maybe that gets handled interestingly in later books. I'm going to go out on a limb and say I kind of doubt it. But check back at episode 200 for, what's the second one? The Girl That Played with Fire?
Yeah, and as a man who has read that book, I can assure you that is not the case.
Well, perhaps it's in book 3. I think it's the girl who kicked the hornet's nest.
It's true. By book 2, we've kind of hit the reset button on Lisbeth, and she's gone from like being this socially reclusive hacker to like literal superhero who shoots people and then puts her finger in the bullet hole for revenge and stuff. It gets fucking nasty.
Jesus.
She basically becomes the Punisher by the next book. So
I mean, and okay, you cannot tell me. It probably wouldn't have been as successful, but you couldn't tell me it wouldn't have been a slightly better series if it had been like Men Who Hate Women 1, Women Rising, Men Who Hate Women 2, Women Strike Back,
Yeah.
Men Who Hate Women 3, Women on Top. Well,
Men Who Hate Women 4, Fury Road.
Yeah.
Because literally that movie does a better job getting across what this book's trying to do. I want to point out, we haven't even really gotten into the controversy surrounding this book, so I do want to talk about the real life circumstances of it to a certain degree.
Oh, is this about the controversy that rocked the aluminium industry?
It is. No, I want to talk just a little bit about kind of the lineage of these books in general, because as it is well known by now, Stieg Larsson turned all 3 of the first books into his publisher and then died almost immediately afterwards. There are a lot of people who think it was a conspiracy.
What did he die of?
Some kind of heart failure, so there are people who think he was poisoned, but most of his coworkers have said he smoked 3 packs of cigarettes a day and ate nothing but fast food.
Actually, I do really like the through line in this where he's like constantly bumming cigarettes off his girlfriend and hating her and hating himself for it. Like there's a couple sentences where he's like, he reached for the pack, cursing himself. And like, as somebody who quit smoking, yeah, relatable.
Yeah, for sure. But I do think it's interesting that supposedly he had a laptop with notes for 8 more of these books, or 7. No, 9, because there were supposedly going to be a dozen novels in the Millennium series written.
Who is this motherfucker, L. Ron Hubbard?
I guess so. And he had a partner, a life partner, named Eva Gabrielson, who he never married, and when he died, it kind of left her life in shambles in a lot of ways because he never really wrote an official will. And there are a lot of people who are very close to the two of them that are convinced that she had a pretty huge hand in actually writing these.
And why is that?
Because she is a writer,
And
whereas he is a journalist who most of his colleagues described as an exceptional researcher, but a very bad writer.
So it's kind of actually an interesting role swap into the book if you take the self-insert character to be him, obviously, because he's a smoking, left-wing investigative reporter, investigative journalist, but he offloads all the actual talent into this Lisbeth Salander character.
Yeah.
Right, so he's sort of splitting himself into 2, which is probably why the 2 hit it off so well.
Yeah, I mean, but it is very interesting that, there are, colleagues of his who swear there's no way in hell he wrote this book. I think that's kind of interesting. I don't know if it's true or not. At the very least, it seems like he got a lot of help from his partner.
Give me a fucking break. If your argument that he didn't write this book
Is that he's a bad writer.
rests on the fact that he wasn't a good writer.
That's a good point.
I have to ask if you read the book.
That is a good point. But what's really interesting about it is it gets into the fact that Gabrielson, his partner, has been like incredibly evasive and has changed her story like a bunch of times about this, like to the point where at one point she denied having anything to do with writing the books, and then in another interview kept using the word "we" to describe the process of writing it. And there's just a lot of just kind of weird real life mystery surrounding this. And it all depends on who you want to believe. But I feel like it's at least worth bringing up because it does kind of add a layer of real life intrigue to the story that I found kind of fascinating in a lot of ways. I also think, just if you want to add fuel to the fire, and I'm not necessarily one of these conspiracy theorists.
Jay?
Yeah.
Give me fuel.
Give
me fire.
I will give you that which you desire.
No, I believe that's give me dabba-da-ga-da.
Yeah.
Give me fuel, give me fire, give me dabba-ga-da.
What I did think was very interesting is when the American version came out that was based on the non-edited version and everyone flipped the fuck out about it, Like one of the heaviest critics of it was Eva Gabrielson. She came down with the fucking fury on this American translator, to the point where he took his name off of the book because she and the guy who edited it in Swedish were making his life a living hell, basically. So at the very least, she feels very protective of this, and so I'm not going to come down on either side of it. Like, my guess is he wrote this book with a lot more outside help than maybe a lot of people think. But either way, there's an
Wasn't enough of it.
There's an interesting story there. If you want to dive down that did Shakespeare really exist kind of rabbit hole with this, there's a lot on the internet you can read about it that's pretty fucking interesting.
Do not, for fuck's sake, do anything before you start getting into it. Conspiracy theory rabbit holes on the internet. We've been doing that since the X-Files, and look what happened to us.
No, it's true. I spent way too much time on lost message boards during the first few seasons, and look at me. Now I'm trying to draw diagrams of how the Cloverfield movies interact.
Here's how they interact.
They don't.
There's a straight line going into the toilet.
Yeah. There's a series of spec scripts that were bought and had the word Cloverfield inserted clumsily into them. Oh, I said it.
I actually have interesting theories to say to people about the Cloverfield paradox. Please do at me, and I will share them with you online.
Here's one of my interesting theories. It's a movie that was in production since 2012 that had nothing to do with the Cloverfield franchise until Paramount dumped the rights on Netflix to Bad Robot.
More like the Bloverfield paradox.
Oh, dang. Or maybe the get it over with paradox. That was a stretch.
Yeesh.
But I sure do like the part where the guy's arm writes on its own. I mean, I have a theory that script was originally intended as a comedy. I think it works really well.
I mean, that's obviously the movie Chris O'Dowd thought he was in.
Yeah.
I have a theory that he did not have a copy of the script and that he improvised basically every line he had in that movie. And the biggest thing I'm upset about in that movie, of all the many, many things that movie left on the table, including being good, telling a story anybody could give a flying fuck about, or making even one lick of sense. The biggest thing it left on the table was there's this noise coming from a bulkhead, and he says, bulkheads don't make noises like that. They open it up, and a girl's been teleported into it, and she got wires coming out of her face and stuff. And he doesn't then say, see, I told you bulkheads don't make noises like that. It's so fucking obvious.
Yeah.
That would have been the best part of the movie.
Yeah, I agree. It's a waste of many incredible actors.
I thought it was actually a very well-acted movie.
It was an incredibly well-acted piece of shit. But we aren't a movie podcast. I will say I can't remember her name. She was
unless you're giving us money on Patreon.
That's true.
Wink.
She was in the one good episode of Black Mirror, the San Junipero. I can't remember her name. The actress who has the most lustrous hair I've ever seen. And so throughout this space station disaster movie, it's like, wow, her hair is incredible. So I really enjoyed that part too.
Wait. Who has the most lustrous hair you've ever seen?
Oh, sorry, I meant you. Or
let's go to break.
What was her name? Rebecca Gaylord, the Pantene girl that eventually showed up in 90210. Noxema girl, that was it. She had lustrous hair too. Anyway, I think that's about all the ranting and raving I have in me. So we should probably go to break and do some games, unless there's anything you want to get off your chest.
I love this book. No, I don't love this book. I got nothing to get off my chest.
All right, well, let's take a break, and we'll come back and have some fun.
The Swedish chef gets dark.
We've just spent like 30 minutes with me trying to convince Collision to buy a PS4 so he could play Monster Hunter with me. Get at me, Jay Feezy on PSN. Looking for buddies. But now we're back to play some games of a different nature.
And I would like someone to PayPal me $100 because we are like hip deep in a book about Sweden, and I have not talked about hockey at all. And like 98% of what I know about Sweden is filtered through the fact that they produce a lot of pro hockey players, and the other 2% is like me sighing and rolling my eyes when my drunk dad would tell me lies about his Swedish family.
I'm trying to think, has there ever been a Swedish wrestler?
Tor Johnson, I think, was Swedish by background.
Good call, yeah. I know there's a lot of Swedish guys at MMA. I just don't know about pro wrestling. So,
Right.
yeah.
So, anywho, moving on.
So, I think it's about that time for us to bring forth the rhythm and the rhyme, where we take parts of this book and read them to you dramatically. So here is Dramatic Readings.
Dramatic readings. We're gonna make it sound important. Dramatic readings. Yeah, I got some words for you.
You know, before we get into dramatic readings, I did just want to read one little piece here, which is a excerpt of an email, which happens a lot in this book. And this is an email that our hero, Blomqvist, gets after he's convicted of libel from someone named Democrat88 at yahoo.com.
Oh, my God.
That says, I hope you suck C-word in the slammer, you fucking commie pig. Why did I just censor cock? I hope you suck cock in the slammer, you fucking commie pig. He filed it in the intelligent commentary folder.
Oh, Blomqvist, you win this round. Okay, so as long as we're doing this, I'm also going to read a passage from the early pages of this book. More literary-minded listeners may remember that David Foster Wallace wrote a book not too long ago called The Pale King, and in it,
The unfinished one.
yeah, and yet published. And in that book, he riffs at extraordinary length about.
Wait. David Foster Wallace riffing at extraordinary length?
I mean,
I never.
I'm gonna have to ask you to give me a little rope here. I know I'm
sorry.
going out on a limb, but let's see if we can pull this together. On the power of boredom, particularly the power of boredom at work, and about the possible transcendent Zen-like properties of boredom. As he sat there on the boat, Blomqvist filled his glass with Reimer Holmes brandy and leaned back, trying to remember what little he knew about Wennerström. Born up in Norrland, where in the 70s he set up an investment company, he made money and moved to Stockholm, and then his career took off in the 80s. He created Wennerström Gruppen, the Wennerström Group, when they set up offices in London and New York, and the company started to get mentioned in the same articles as Beijer. He traded stock and options and liked to make quick deals, and he emerged in the celebrity press as one of Sweden's numerous billionaires with a city home on Strandvägen, a fabulous summer villa on the island of Varmado, and an 82-foot motor yacht that he bought from a bankrupt former tennis star. He was a bean counter, naturally, but the 80s was the decade of the bean counters and property speculators, and Wennerström had not made a significantly big splash. On the contrary, he had remained something of a man in the shadows among his peers. He lacked John Stenbeck's flamboyance and did not spread himself all over the tabloids like Percy Barnevik.
I feel like I'm reading Valleywag.
Yeah, so what this proves to me is that David Foster Wallace read this book and thought him some thoughts about the power of boredom.
The Pale King's about the guy who works at the post office, is that correct?
The IRS. That's one of the things it's about. Yeah.
I got the impression that he read Clive Barker's The Great and Secret Show, was like, how can I make this boring?
I suggest to you that if you read The Great and Secret Show, you do not need to ask, how can I make this boring?
I love that book.
Oh my God, are you shitting me?
I am not shitting you at all. I love that book and all its sequels. I think the concept of quiddity is one of the most beautiful things I've ever read in like a genre fiction novel, and I'm probably not equipped to host a podcast about literature. Okay, I have found my dramatic reading, and while we're talking about the power of boredom, let's talk about the power of technology-related boredom, because shit's about to get real, because Lisbeth Salander is about to go computer shopping.
Oh.
Her rucksack contained her white Apple iBook 600 with a 25 gig hard drive and 420 megs of RAM. Nice. Manufactured in January 2002 and equipped with a 14-inch screen. At the time she bought it, it was Apple's state-of-the-art laptop. Salander's computers were upgraded with the very latest and sometimes most expensive configurations. Computer equipment was the only extravagant entry on her list of expenses. When she opened her rucksack, she could see that the lid of the computer was cracked. She plugged in the power cord and tried to boot it up, not even a death rattle. She took it over to Timmy's Mac Jesus shop on, oh my god, Braincurcagaton, hoping that at least something on the hard drive could be saved. After fiddling with it for a short time, Timmy shook his head. "Sorry, no hope," he said. "You'll have to arrange a nice funeral." The loss of her computer was depressing, but not disastrous. Salander had an excellent relationship with it during the years she had owned it. She backed up all her documents, and she had an older desktop Mac G3 at home, as well as a 5-year-old Toshiba PC laptop that she could use. But she needed a fast, modern machine. Unsurprisingly, she set her sights on the best available alternative, the new Apple PowerBook G4 1 GHz in an aluminum case with a PowerPC 7451 processor with an Altitech Velocity engine, 960 megabytes of RAM, and a 60 gigabyte hard drive. It had Bluetooth and built-in CD and DVD burners. Best of all, it had the first 17-inch screen in the laptop world with NVIDIA graphics and a resolution of 1440 by 900 pixels, which shook the PC advocates and outranked everything else on the market. In terms of hardware, it was the Rolls-Royce of portable computers, but what really triggered Salander's need to have it was the simple feature that the keyboard was equipped with backlighting, so that she could see the letters even when it was pitch dark. So simple. Why had no one thought of that before? It was love at first sight.
Okay, first thing, when you said G4, I really wanted like an anime cutaway to somebody saying like, "Oh, G4." Second, the reason you don't need a backlit keyboard is because you know how to touch type.
Yeah. And also, you probably live in a house with lights that turn on and off if you can afford a computer.
Not if your character has
level.
been thinly sketched from a late night watching of Hackers.
Oh, that's a very good point. I mean, she right down to the haircut, she is Angelina Jolie in Hackers, just brunette and slightly thinner. So you're right.
Actually, just as a quick side note, if you are disappointed in the way that we handled the plot in these movies, I can actually recommend
Books.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. In these books, I can actually just recommend that you watch either of the movies that were made, because they do a shockingly good job of compressing what is an unwieldy amount of plot into a fairly manageable runtime. So
I'll agree, except I'm going to say watch the actual Swedish ones and not the American adaptations, because they are 1,000 times better. If you don't mind watching subtitled movies.
I think they're about on par.
I disagree 100%. But yeah, they're both series are good and way better than reading the book. And if you're listening to this and you're very confused about the things we're talking about, the movie kind of, both versions of it, the Swedish and the American version, really do cut out a lot of the extraneous bullshit and really get down to the story. And they're actually gripping thrillers, which, surprise, at the core of this book, there's something pretty interesting going on.
One of the unexpected and unintended consequences of that, though, is, as I mentioned, this book has a lot of very disturbing material.
Oh.
But the fact that it's overwhelmed by so much other stuff kind of takes the sting out of that. Those movies are both like 40% extraordinarily disturbing material by volume.
See, that's something I'm going to disagree with, and I'm going to say that's more true in the American version than the original Swedish version.
Because I think the original Swedish version was actually made for TV.
Yeah, I think it was, and also, I mean, the cast in the Swedish version has Noomi Rapace playing Lisbeth Salander, as opposed to Rooney Mara, and man,
that's the biggest advantage the Swedish ones have. Actually, their Blomkvist is also much better as like a middle-aged journalist than Daniel Craig, who is not exactly my go-to, 43-year-old getting a little fat.
Well, yeah, their version as Michael Nyqvist, who you would know from John Wick as the scary European guy. He's a crime lord in John Wick. He's also been in a bunch of very, very good kind of I guess made for TV or made for, eventually ended up on Netflix Swedish thrillers like Abduction and Disconnect and Europa Report that are all really good. He's an actor with gravitas, which to me, I love Daniel Craig. Daniel Craig's gravitas is more of the soccer hooligan variety. So, yeah.
Yeah, Daniel Craig is just an extraordinarily pretty man who occasionally looks like he's serious about something.
Yeah, and I mean, also, like, I feel like his number one kind of defining feature as an actor is looks like he could beat the fuck out of you. So,
And looks like he may.
yeah.
Do not bring him the wrong kind of herring on a sandwich.
Exactly.
He will not take that well. This is the longest we've ever spent between readings of a dramatical nature. So without further ado, let me dive into it. I'm actually going to stay fairly close to what you had, because this is, for my money, maybe contains the funniest single parenthetical I have ever read in a mass market published thing.
And by the way, we have already mentioned David Foster Wallace, so keep that in mind.
Ayo. Berger had been right to say that his taking the assignment was beyond all common sense if the goal was to solve a murder mystery. But Blomkvist was beginning to see that Harriet's fate had played a central role in the family, and especially for Henrik Vanger. No matter whether he was right or wrong, Vanger's accusation against his relatives was of great significance in the family's history. The accusation had been aired openly for more than 30 years, and it had colored the family gatherings and given rise to poisonous animosities that had contributed to destabilizing the corporation. A study of Harriet's disappearance would consequently function as a chapter all on its own, as well as provide a red thread through the family history, and there was an abundance of source material. One starting point, whether Harriet Vanger was his primary assignment or whether he made do with writing a family chronicle, would be to map out the gallery of characters. That was the gist of his first long conversation that day with Vanger. The family consisted of about 100 individuals, counting all the children of cousins and second cousins. The family was so extensive that he was forced to create a database in his iBook. He used the Notepad program, www.ibrium.se, one of those full-value products that two men at the Royal Technical College had created and distributed as shareware for a pittance on the internet. Few programs were as useful for an investigative journalist. Each family member was given his or her own document in the database.
I did not go to that website. And if you're listening to this at home, go there and see if it still exists, because I really want to know if it does. In the meantime, we're on episode 100, so why the fuck not?
www.ibrium.se is the funniest thing I've ever read in a novel.
Yeah, it is pretty hilarious that suddenly there's a plug for a shareware web app.
Which I also love, let's see, what do I know? I know that sometimes things get a little unwieldy and you can't just, rely on Microsoft Access to be on your laptop because you use a Mac. It's a little too big for a spreadsheet. I wonder if anyone's got a shareware database. And actually, the biggest surprise in this book is that he does not actually spend 7 pages explaining what shareware is, where it came from, how it evolved,
how Excel formulas work. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because this was before the days where Microsoft was making Mac software, which, by the way, I'm a big fan of Visual Studio Code, which is a Microsoft product I use on my Mac all the time. So times they have changed. But this is our 100th episode, and I really want to read one more piece of this book. Can I be allowed to do that?
No.
No, please. Please.
I don't know. It sounds like you're playing with fire.
I am. I'm about to kick the hornet's nest, as it were. This is a very long excerpt, so, just get ready. But this is one of the first times in our book where a man, in his 40s or 50s is...
A man? But what is a man? I won't say a hero, but he's a man of his time.
Trying to remember that fucking Castlevania quote that I can't remember about like a twisted mass of secrets or something like that.
You mean Alucard?
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, no, don't write in. So this is the first kind of instance of a man trying to grapple with his feelings of Lisbeth, and I found this very entertaining in many ways. So bear with me, folks, as we take a ride down this rocky path. 3 weeks later, when Armansky was working late one evening going over the year-end bookkeeping, Salander reappeared. She came into his office as silently as a ghost, and he became aware that she was standing in the shadows inside the doorway watching him. He had no idea how long she had been there. Would you like some coffee? She asked. She handed him a cup from the espresso machine in the canteen. Mutely, he accepted it, feeling both relief and terror when she shoved the door closed with her foot. She sat down opposite his desk and looked him straight in the eye. Then she asked the question in a way that could neither be laughed off nor avoided. Dragon, are you attracted to me? Armansky sat as if paralyzed while desperately wondering how to answer. His first impulse was to pretend to be insulted. Then he saw her expression, and it came to him that this was the first time she had ever uttered any such personal question. It was seriously meant, and if he tried to laugh it off, she would take it as an affront. She wanted to talk to him, and he wondered how long it had taken her to get up the courage to ask that question. He slowly put down his pen and leaned back in his chair. Finally, he relaxed. What makes you think that? He said. The way you look at me, and the way you don't look at me, and the times you were about to reach out your hand and touch me, but stopped yourself.
Is this the poem from 10 Things I Hate About You?
I think it is. He smiled at her. I reckoned you'd bite my hand off if I laid a finger on you. She did not smile. She was waiting. Lisbeth, I'm your boss, and even if I were attracted to you, I'd never act on it. She was still waiting. Between us, yes, there have been times when I have felt attracted to you. I can't explain it, but that's the way it is. For some reason I don't really understand. I like you a lot, but it's not a physical thing. That's good, because it'll never happen. Armansky laughed. The first time she had said something personal, it was the most disheartening news a man could imagine receiving. He struggled to find the right words. Lisbeth, I understand that you're not interested in an old man of 50 plus. I'm not interested in an old man of 50 plus who's my boss. She held up a hand. Wait, let me speak. You're sometimes stupid and maddeningly bureaucratic, but you're actually an attractive man, and I can also feel, but you're my boss, and I met your wife, and I want to keep my job with you, and the most idiotic thing I could do is get involved with you. Armansky said nothing, hardly daring to breathe. I'm aware of what you've done for me, and I'm not ungrateful. I appreciate that you actually showed yourself to be greater than your prejudices, and have given me a chance here, but I don't want you for my lover, and you're not my father. After a while, Armansky sighed helplessly. What exactly do you want from me? I want to continue working for you, if that's okay with you. He nodded, and then answered her as honestly as he could. I really do want you to work for me, but I also want you to feel some kind of friendship and trust in me. She nodded. You're not a person who encourages friendship, he said. She seemed to withdraw, but he went on. I understand that you don't want anyone interfering in your life, and I'll try not to do that. But is it all right if I continue to like you? Sorry. Salander thought about it for a long time. Then she replied by getting up, walking around the desk, and giving him a hug. He was totally shocked. Only when she released him did he take her hand. We can be friends? She nodded once. That was the only time she ever showed him any tenderness, and the only time she had ever touched him. It was a moment that Armansky fondly remembered and never forgot.
Just try a little tenderness.
I mean, I just love how this book is filled with older men trying to explain their feelings to Lisbeth. I feel like it's so... I don't know. To me, in my mind, what happened is Stieg Larsson in real life saw a punk rock girl in a bar and was like, she's young enough to be my daughter, but I'm very attracted to her. And the rest of the book just spiraled out from there.
Yeah, maybe. I don't have a second long-form quote, but I do kind of wish we'd done this one as the cold open, maybe.
Okay.
This is something that Salander said. We just finished up a case in which men with fucked up sexuality played a prominent role. If I had to decide, men like that would be exterminated. Every last one of them.
I don't disagree.
The rare overlap between Girl with the Dragon Tattoo and Starship Troopers.
Well, I mean, as I said, in the next book, she turns into the fucking Punisher. And, there are hints of it here where, she refuses to go to the police to report anything. She wants to take revenge into her own hands. We didn't even talk about the part where a man who abuses her, the way she gets back at him is by fucking tying him down and tattooing, right. I am a perverted pig or something like that on his stomach.
Yeah.
She is a vigilante. Right. And that becomes more and more clear as the series goes on, for sure.
Well, I mean, we did mention that she gets, it's in the text, she gets bored with Wennerstrom being on the run after his affairs are disclosed.
Yeah.
And, makes a phone call disclosing his location.
So that he dies.
so that other mobsters kill him.
Yeah.
And when Blomqvist figures out that that's what happens, he literally laughs.
Yeah.
You know, and this is after like probably the most tiresome part of this occasionally extraordinarily tiresome book is Blomkvist like whining about like the ethics of the journalistic profession. Like it's amazing how bureaucratic this book is in some ways.
Yeah.
He's like, what are you talking about? My behavior is carefully circumscribed by the code of the Journalists Association.
In a lot of ways, this book is a complaint by a man who feels kind of very constrained by the rules of his profession and wishes that he could just lash out and kill a motherfucker. And he uses Lisbeth as that fucking vector to do so.
With a lot of plausible deniability.
Yeah.
But you know who isn't constrained by the ethics of any profession is hyper hacker extraordinaire Lisbeth Salander. And that brings me to a little game I'd like to play.
All right, which game is it?
That game is a little thing called What Would They Do?
Sometimes intentions are hard to divine, and others the clear as day. So tell me, what would they do?
Shall we play a game? I mean, we are talking about hacking, so I had to get the war games joke in.
Fuck yeah. All right. So in this game, I don't know the name of this character. We usually build it around a character in the book. So this character is named Swedish J. Friedman.
Oh no. Please tell me it's not Plague, the guy who never leaves his house and has no friends.
It is not.
Okay, good.
You are an enterprising young Swedish designer of Swedish novelty t-shirts.
Oh, yes. Okay, yeah, that sounds right.
And you want to sell one to Lisbeth Salander. What slogan do you put on it that is tougher, and that's tougher with 2 F's, my man, than the following t-shirts, which she wears in the course of the book? Kill them all and let God sort them out. Armageddon was yesterday. Today we have a serious problem. I am also an alien. That's next to a picture of E.T. And I can be a regular bitch. Just try me. So you've got to come up with a slogan that's even tougher than those.
Okay. I'm going to assume it doesn't have to be a 100% original because I'm convinced that every single one of those slogans existed by Stieg Larsson walking into whatever the Swedish version of Hot Topic was back in the late 1990s and just like asking what their top selling t-shirt was. So I'm going to go with something that was actually on the back of a t-shirt I owned as a teenager.
Oh, dear.
A Ned's Atomic Dustbin t-shirt of all things, which had a slogan, "Fuck you, you fucking fuck."
Wow, that's not even the one I expected. That's pretty fucking good. I'm now actually angry that she was not at any point wearing a t-shirt that said that.
Well, I mean, I think Ned's Atomic Dustbin. I don't know if the Grebo movement ever really made its way to Sweden. That I think was kind of a British Isles thing for sure.
It's barely made it to America.
Oh, not if you were me in the 90s, my friend.
I was going to say because
I had all the Carter the Unstoppable Sex Machine records.
I know 3 people who like Ned's Atomic Dustbin, and 2 of them are sitting in this room right now.
Any band with 2 bass players, you're automatically got me. Cop Shoot Cop, I'll listen to them. Yeah.
Butterfly Train?
Yep, yeah. Dianoga? Yeah, anyway.
Them, I don't know. By the way, we should note that about a little less than halfway through this book, Mr. Blomkvist is at his cabin, I believe, and he's like a little bit at loose ends, and there's a line that says, he glanced at the little TV he almost never used.
Ooh, that is so close.
so close!
God damn it.
And what made me think of that is that the Ned's Atomic Dustbin t-shirt slogan I was assuming you were going to go with
Kill Your Television.
would be Kill Your Television.
Yeah, I think that was only on bumper stickers. I don't know if they ever made a Kill Your Television t-shirt, but they definitely made a shirt that said fuck you, you fucking fuck on it. And I wore that to school once and had to turn it inside out.
Like, selling a t-shirt that says fuck you, you fucking fuck, and not selling a t-shirt that says Kill Your Television definitely explains the career trajectory of Ned's Atomic Dustbin, like a band that you could safely say, despite writing many very catchy, beautiful pop rock songs. Maybe left a little money on the table career-wise.
Yeah, I'm gonna say you hear that slogan and you expect like some grindcore, some power violence, and what you actually get is incredibly catchy, like British rock music with kind of break beats and drum machines. And I'm sure I'm gonna use a Dead song for the next break, so you'll know what we're talking about. But yeah. They were into kind of challenging the status quo in the way that teenagers were back then.
Yeah.
How about you?
I was also into. Oh shit! If I had to come up with a slogan.
Yeah. What's your T-shirt slogan? I mean, at this point, it would just be Bullet Club, right? Because that's what you buy at Hot Topic. So.
Certainly not what I buy at Hot Topic, sir. That's a Jesus. Okay. I hadn't thought about this. On your theory that they were all existing T-shirts.
Oh, they absolutely were. Like, I've seen that a T-shirt.
I might be inclined to go with the quasi-official Metallica shirt with like a Spike Ed. I think it was a Gibson Flying V, even though nobody in the band ever played a Flying V.
Metallica?
Yeah.
Oh, no. Kirk Hammett played a Jackson Flying V for a long time.
Did he play a Flying V? Okay,
yeah, he did.
Because I was going to say, because James mostly played Explorers because he
played the
huge
ESP Explorer,
man,
yeah.
and it was a guitar that actually fit him. But anyway, it was a spiked Flying V coming out of a toilet, and it just said, metal up your ass, which strikes me as the kind of anal torture focused thing that Lisbeth Salander might gravitate towards. If I had to come up with one, I don't know. I just heard a story from Noodles about how she was at the gym again wearing a T-shirt, inexplicably reading "I don't own a television," and, and had to have a conversation in the locker room about it. So maybe not that. I got to say, it would probably just say, "Fuck you for looking at me."
That's a good one. What about that Nirvana shirt that the back said flower sniffing, kitty petting, baby kissing corporate rock whores?
That's a really good one. I bought a T-shirt off of AK Press for a friend of mine.
That's already a mistake.
That had a very badly screened picture of Kurt's last minute and the caption, "Nice shooting, Tex."
Oh, that's good. I was going to say, if it came from AK Press, I'm sure the silk screen was like, like about 45 degrees off center.
I don't know why I bought that. Like, Nirvana was one of my favorite bands. Like, I've never, I've complicated thoughts about suicide that I don't care to get into, but I definitely don't think it's worth playing for laughs. Why did I buy that fucking shirt?
I spent a long time at high school trying to convince people that Filter's "Hey Man, Nice Shot" was actually about Nirvana. So I can't talk. I was a horrible person too.
It was, in fact, about Bud.
That
Dwyer,
senator.
Right?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Which, by the way, totally unrelated. Just want to tell this story. The singer from Filter is the brother of the guy who played the evil Terminator in Terminator 2, Robert Patrick. Is that his name?
Yeah.
And a friend of mine who is a monitor engineer did monitors for Filter show less than 10 years ago. They're very much not in the spotlight at this point anytime. And I guess like during the sound check, something went wrong, and Robert Patrick's brother, whatever his name is, went over to him and was like, hey, you gotta do this when this changes. And my friend who runs monitors was like, okay, that's cool, just keep me in the loop. And dude from Filter gave him the death glare, pointed in his chest, like jabbed him in the chest, and said, "I am the loop." So don't listen to Filter anyway.
So everybody's favorite Filter song is "Hey Man, Nice Shot," right? What's your second favorite Filter song?
There are no other Filter songs. My second favorite Filter song, I think, is actually by like Power Man 5000 or something.
I
Did they do Dragula? Oh no, that was Rob Zombie.
I thought the second best Filter song was that one that was like, "Wanna put my tender heart in a blender."
No, that's
found nothing but faith in nothing.
That's the band with Don Was his son in it.
And then like my third favorite Filter song was probably that
Eve 6.
It's called "One Thing."
I like the one that's like, "I like the dirt up on your knees." The band you mentioned earlier, though, was Eve 6, which, by the way, like, when I found this out, it blew my mind. The reason that band had a record contract is their drummer's dad is Don Was from Was Not Was.
Also, that song fucking owns.
It's really great if you like big words employed in a way that makes no sense, which also means you're a Bad Religion fan.
I'm sitting right here.
All right.
You have accurately described me. Let's play another game.
All right, sorry, we're getting deep.
That's a little game we like to call Remember Things from the 90s.
It's episode 100. We can do whatever the fuck we want. I'm taking my pants off as we speak.
We're trying
and
to-
my jacket, like the Blink-182 album.
I did last night respond to a very heartfelt text from one of my oldest friends with, I guess this is growing up, and then 26 seconds later in all caps, blinked.
Blinked. Awesome. Well, at least he knows you really care.
I'm a really good friend. If you want to be friends with me, you'll get text messages like that all the time. Anywho, let's do another game, which is a little thing I like to call What, Jay, is your fave?
What is your fave? What is your fave? When you're presented with a list of options, what is your fave?
All right, what is your fave? We're going to attempt to answer one of the eternal probing questions of all time, which is, what is your favorite thing? But in this case, it's going to be hard because it's what is your favorite thing about something that is suboptimal.
Yeah. So I bragged earlier that this guy had done his research on mystery novels and that I could prove it. Well, I'm about to fucking prove it.
Oh, you're going to blow the lid off this whole thing.
Exactly.
Are you going to crack this case wide open,
Yeah.
which is a phrase that's used in this book?
Like about 80 times.
Yeah.
What, Jay, is your fave mystery novel or novelist mentioned by name in the course of this book from the following list?
Okay, I was just going to start looking them up, but yeah.
Sue Grafton, Ake Edwardson,
You can stop right there.
Dorothy Sayers, Sarah Paretsky, Val McDermott, Mickey Spillane,
Not mysteries, by the way, but yeah, continue.
a twin mystery by Sivar Al-Harad, The Metro Mystery, which made him smile in recognition, some famous 5 novels by Enid Blyton, and 3 books by Astrid Lindgren. This is funny. These are not actually mysteries, but just children's books. The Children of Noisy Village, Kalle Blomqvist, and Erasmus and Pippi Longstocking.
Yeah, no, you could have stopped right away.
Okay.
Because the answer is Sue Grafton. Because if there's 2 things I love, it's mystery novels and the alphabet. So,
Oh, man.
no, I really love those books. Like, I think she wrote some really, really good, tight little parlor room mysteries. And you know, I don't think you could go wrong with a Sue Grafton book if that's what you're after. And as a lot of people who listen to this show know, that is generally what I'm after. So, A is for Alibi is a great starting place because A, really good book. B, first letter of the alphabet.
Intriguing.
Yeah.
All right. If she'd been smarter and like a better career person, she would have started like with 1 is for the first thing.
One Little Indian.
Because you never run out of those.
Yeah, and then you could do the thing like when people used to jockey to be at the front of the phone book, and her next one could be like called like AAA as for awesome, atrocious alibi. And then she'd always be like filed first by title when you sorted.
Oh my god. Hey, should we ever do one of those Dick Francis books? He wrote like 7,000 books about horse racing.
I don't know who
murders.
Dick Francis is.
He's a guy who wrote 7,000 books about horse racing murders.
Well, in that case, yes.
Okay.
I've been watching a lot of Midsummer Murders, and let me tell you, horse racing murders, that's a popular topic.
What I don't know is if they're actually bad.
It doesn't matter. Are they British?
Yeah.
Okay, so they're inherently comical to American assholes like us.
Hold on, I've got to call Kevin Mahan.
My friend, he is Irish.
Whatever. Ireland is part of Britain.
Oh, yeah, you're right. As opposed to England. You're right. I'm wrong. Yeah, but yeah, maybe we should do a horse racing mystery soon. I'd be down with that.
Neat. Stay tuned. Do you have another game you would like to play? I mean, one of the things that I like about this book is that on generally any given spread of it, that's a little bullet journal term for those of you at home, there is something inherently this book about it. I was looking at my notes, and so many of them are just like, there'd be like a 100-page stretch where I'm just like trying to get through it. And then there'd be something that struck me funny on one page, and then there would be something that struck me funny on the next page. So maybe we should roulette this Russianly. Okay,
let's give it a try, although I'm worried I'm going to end up on some horrifying sex shit.
Well, we'll just edit that out.
All right, cool.
I mean, not that we would
No, wait. This is completely organic and random. Here's a song.
Russian roulette, Russian roulette, Russian roulette, not actually Russian.
All right, Russian roulette is here. I'm going to flip through this book. Collision's going to tell me when to stop, and then I'm going to read something from it to you, unless it's really, really gross, in which case I'll continue to flip.
Start flipping, comrade. Yeah, stop.
Oh, no, this is actually very good. Blomquist spent 2 hours in the garden behind his cabin, going through the Apocrypha, without gaining a single insight. But a thought occurred to him. How religious had Harriet Wenger actually been? Her interest in Bible studies had started the last year before she vanished. She had linked a number of Bible quotes to a series of murders, and then methodically read not only her Bible, but also the Apocrypha, and she had developed an interest in Catholicism. Had she really done the same investigation that Blomquist and Salander were doing 37 years later? Was it the hunt for the murderer that had spurred her interest rather than religiosity? Pastor Falk had indicated in his eyes that she was more of a seeker, not a good Christian. He was interrupted by Berger calling him on his mobile. I just wanted to tell you that Gregor and I are leaving on holiday next week. We'll be gone for 4 weeks. Where are you going? New York. Gregor has an exhibition, and then we thought we'd go to the Caribbean. We have a chance to borrow a house on Antigua from a friend of Gregor's, and we're staying there 2 weeks. That sounds wonderful. Have a great time, and say hi to Gregor. The new issue of the magazine is finished, and we've almost wrapped up the next one. I wish you could take over as editor, but Krister has said he will do it. He can call me if he needs any help. How's it going with John Dahlman? So, yeah. There we go. Just that radical shift from investigating a murder to talking about the realities of running a political newspaper. And that is all in one paragraph.
Let's do some office politics on screen. Everybody likes that, right?
Yeah. Who doesn't want to know how the sausage gets made in the world of small-time business-related journalistic publications?
All right. Shall I start flipping?
Yes. Stop.
He was still at the kitchen table at 11 o'clock, staring one by one again at the photographs when he heard the door open. May I come in? It was Cecilia Wenger. Without waiting for an answer, she sat down across from him at the table. Blomquist had a strange feeling of déjà vu. She was dressed in a thin, loose, light-colored dress and grayish-blue jacket. Clothes almost identical to those she was wearing in the photographs from 1966. Okay, first off, no, she wasn't.
Yeah, and B, why do you still have the same clothes you were wearing 50 years ago, and how do they still fit?
She didn't.
Oh, it was her sister.
That's bad descriptions.
Yes.
You're the one who's the problem, she said. Blomquist raised his eyebrows. Forgive me, but you took me by surprise when you knocked on the door tonight. Now I'm so unhappy I can't sleep. Why are you unhappy? Don't you know? He shook his head. If I tell you, promise you won't laugh. When I seduced you last winter, it was an idiotic, impulsive act. I wanted to enjoy myself, that's all. That first night I was quite drunk, and I had no intention of starting anything long-term with you. Then it turned into something else. I want you to know that those weeks with you as my occasional lover were some of the happiest in my life. I thought it was lovely, too. Mikhail, I've been lying to you and to myself the whole time. I've never been particularly relaxed about sex. I've had 5 sex partners my entire life. One when I was 21 and a debutante. Then with my husband, whom I met when I was 25 and who turned out to be a bastard.
Check.
And then a few times with 3 guys I met several years apart.
Check, check, check.
May I
That's written very ambiguously, by the way.
May I have the first slide, please?
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway.
So yeah, the way that is written, I would just like to point out.
That's a conversation that people definitely have just like that.
And I also just want to say the way that's written is very, very ambiguous, in that she could be describing 3 consecutive affairs, or she could be describing 2 very kind of, standard romantic affairs, and then suddenly a sex party.
Yeah.
So you can
who knows?
interpret that however you want.
Yeah. Anyway, I just like that. She starts off mad, pauses to compliment him, pauses again to give a detailed précis of her sexual history. And then I think it goes on for like 65 more pages.
Oh, yeah, it does. And it's just basically all of them talking about, Blomquist, he's just so irresistible. Women throw themselves at him, and then they regret it later because they fall in love with him, even though they don't have any intention to.
I actually do really like there's a moment when, like, after he and Lisbeth have hooked up, she like kind of snaps at him for a second and is like, maybe I don't want to sleep with you. And his response is like, basically, oh, no, that's fine. I obviously don't want you to sleep with me if you don't feel like it. We still work together. Is that okay? If it's not okay, we can talk about that. And it's just this like really relentlessly checklisty nice guy, reasonable person thing. And it's, I don't know. It's funny. More people should act like that. It's not exactly the most believable thing I've
Consent
ever seen.
is navigated very well in this book.
Or at least very explicitly.
Yeah. There's just a couple more one-liners I just have to get off my chest
Oh,
here.
hell yeah.
At one point, our extreme villain, who it's revealed at the end of the book, is actually Martin, the heir to the Vanger Empire, where when he's talking about his motivations for, having a dungeon and murdering lots of people per year, says, those of us who murder for pleasure, I'm not the only one with this hobby. We live a complete life.
Oh, God.
It's so corny. And also, I just wanted to illustrate this because this is Blomquist receiving a present from his daughter, and this is the man in his late 40s, perhaps early 50s, that every woman finds irresistible. She took a package out of her bag. He opened it and found a CD, the best of the Eurythmics. She knew it was one of his favorite old bands. Man, nothing says sexual dynamo like a huge fan of the Eurythmics.
Yeah, he then sits with his daughter and they listen to one song off it, and he puts her on a
Through
train.
the speakers of his fucking laptop, which, okay, that is a goddamn crime. That's like those idiots on the bus that like listen to music really loud on their phone. Fuck that. All right, anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, Jay, what would you say is the overall emotion that this book gives you?
Rage.
So would you say that you're madly in Vanger with this book?
I would. And when it comes time for me to think about this in the future, I don't think I'll look back at Vanger. Instead, I'll just treat it like a Blomquist from a rose.
If you were an experimental novelist, if you were an experimental filmmaker who wanted to make a sort of collage-based psychosexual leather tale about this and rock and roll, you might be Kenneth Vanger.
That's just what I was, yeah. At the very least, I'd make a cool Lucifer jacket that everyone seems to be wearing all of a sudden now. I don't know why.
Well, enough of our Hollywood babbling on.
Oh my gosh. Jesus. Wow. I'm glad I got that Filmstruck subscription so I get these jokes.
Who put the nickel in Collision? No one knows.
Yeah. By the way, everyone go watch The Night in the City. It's a really good film noir about professional wrestling that was made in the 1950s.
Don't watch The Goon, which is a movie made about hockey. It was made in the early 2000s.
This has Stanislav Sobiesko in it, who was a legitimate actual pro wrestler in the 1920s, playing an old washed-up pro wrestler. And my God, the dude is built like a beer barrel with legs and arms, and it's pretty amazing to see in real life. So, yeah, I guess we're done talking about this book. Let's take a break and come back and talk about something else, unless there's anything else you need to get out there.
I'm good.
I'm good, too. We're running long, but hey, episode 100.
Woo!
Episode 100.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10.
Yeah, I don't know how to say 100 in Swedish, or I'd do that. Spanish is as close as you're going to get. Sorry, folks. We'll be right back.
Said you don't know shit because you've never been there. She turned upon him, took him by the hair.
We're back. Fair warning. I've had a few beers because it's episode 100. Once again, it's time for celebration.
Episode 100 and minute 3000.
Yeah, no, I believe we are approaching 2 hours now. So you're getting your free money's worth. But this is the part of the show where we're done talking about the girl, her dragon tattoo, and all of her hacking skills. And we moved on to recommending things that we enjoyed a lot more than this. So, Collision, would you like to start us off?
Why don't you go first?
Okay, so I'm just going to say, if you want to read a book that kind of exists in that Scandinavian world, or maybe even see a TV show of it that's also about a murder mystery, you should check out Peter Hoig's, which I'm totally pronouncing wrong, I'm sure, his Wallander novels or the TV adaptations of them, because they're also about people in a very similar environment solving pretty dark crimes, but they're not crap. So, yeah, check that out, Wallander. It's pretty good. I think a lot of it's on Netflix right now.
I read one Wallander book right after I got my Kindle. I went on a little vacation, and I remember, basically reading it to my head in a, what's the word? A hammock.
Yeah.
Jesus. Vacation word.
Yeah, vacation, hammock, beach, cabana.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Read it to my head in a hammock and have no memory of it whatsoever.
They're very quick. They're gripping mysteries. They're very dark. A lot of them deal with, some kind of dark sides of humanity and stuff. But the cool thing about them is they're not 700 pages long and they actually go someplace. So, yeah, I would check out those. And like I said, again, there's a TV adaptation of it that I think is now on Netflix. I can't remember if it was for the BBC or Swedish TV. It may be subtitled. But either way, really, really good mystery TV show, especially if you like that kind of, I'm a damaged man just trying to fucking solve some mysteries and kick my drinking problem kind of bullshit. So, yeah, check it out.
That's actually really funny because I hadn't quite put my finger on it before. I checked this book out from the library, and that required me to do things like get a library card, because my old one had been expired so long that they just made me get a new one. And this is the first thing I got on my new card. And when I went and checked it out, I got a look from the librarian because I'd actually put it on hold to make sure that I didn't have to go spend money on it. And the look from the librarian had a certain judgy quality.
No, that's fair.
That I didn't realize was because she probably thought I was a guy trying to read, damaged man, damaged novel, just trying to do right by women.
What would Breaking Bad be like as a novel?
I knew I should have left my fedora in the car.
Yeah. No, that's the problem. It was the fedora and the anonymous mask.
Was she mad because I addressed her as Milady? It's not my fault. I just didn't know her name.
And look, I am not going into a public building without a Guy Fawkes mask. Surveillance is everywhere. I saw Snowden. I know what's up.
Yeah, libraries are a scheme by the man.
Yep.
To surveil us. Anyway, my recommendations are going to be preposterously on brand. I'm going to recommend two very short things.
I'm not going to jump ahead and try to predict them because I don't
you
want to
will be able to, and that will just make me feel bad. So thank you for not doing it. One is a transcript of a talk recently given by Masha Gessen, who's a Russian-American journalist. It's called To Be or Not to Be. And it's all at the New York Review of Books. I'll link to it in the show notes, but if you search it, you will find it. And it's a very interesting thing, roughly on the topic of choice, which for an old and boring existentialist like me, I found very interesting to think about, kind of unlike this book. And the other thing was a letter written by a very young poet to an older poet. The younger poet was named Joan Murray. The older poet was named Auden. And that is called An Off Pursuit. And that's in Harper's. And I'll link to that. And that letter, I really hate this phrase, but all I can say is it made me feel some feelings. It put me through some changes. I've read it a few times now. My opinion on it changes every time, which is kind of a lot to say for something that's probably all of 400 words long. So just read it, sit with it, maybe reread it sometime.
A quick question. Is this beef? Is this fan appreciation? What's the letter all about? Are we talking like a Tupac and Biggie kind of situation here, or?
No, we're talking like a last time we talked, you said something that kind of made me feel bad.
Oh.
I want to give a better description of what I am up to than I gave you last time.
Huh. So it's not just straight up, your poems is trash.
That would be a great letter. More poets should write each other letters to just diss tracks.
I mean, admittedly, like, you know, I'm kind of ignorant about the world of poetry, but if there was more beef and more explicit dissing going on,
I mean, there is, but I think it's all at dinner parties. And
it's all subtextual.
No, it's very textual, but like it's all just gossip and very rarely gets kind of like actually written down and probably almost never published in Harper's. More's the pity.
Okay.
But anyway, both of those made me think and maybe disagree in some interesting ways. And so I'm not necessarily endorsing that which I am recommending.
But you're recommending that it's worth your attention.
Precisely.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's what that's part of the show is about. And the next part of the show is about talking to you, our listeners. So here are some letters.
A, letter B, letter C, letter D, letter E, letter F, letter G, letter. Got a lot of letters.
All right.
All right, we got them.
Here's the first letter. It's by record scratch noise. Chris Collision?
What?
Dear guys, last time you talked for a million hours about a guy in a bear suit, and you did not make any puns about how it was barely tolerable or barely entertaining.
Yeah, that wasn't an accident.
I, Chris Collision, am disappointed that didn't happen. Sincerely, Chris Collision. Anyway, I figured that out in the shower the other day and really actually felt embarrassed that I hadn't done that.
Oh, man, no, that was not an accident.
It was definitely an accident on my part. I just didn't think of it.
Well, you're lucky, because I would have made all sorts of fun of you on the air.
Okay, here's some actual letters. This one is actually from a Chris, but not me. Chris, fake last name, if you will. And it goes like this. Hi, guys. Love the show.
Hey.
Nothing says I don't know guns like the phrase long distance rifle. Best, Chris. I'm going to assume that this was something that either one of us said or that some book said. I have no idea which.
I know. I can tell you exactly.
Okay.
It's from last episode. The Naturalist, where our sniper is referred to as using a long distance rifle.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. One or the other of us may have repeated it, but that was in the text.
I like to think of myself as a long distance lover, but I don't know much about rifles. You got me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know with paintball, if you're using that little scope and the barrel's longer, you can hit people from further away and spend more time being sneaky and weaselly, which is my nature. That's about the extent of my gun knowledge. I also know from playing video games that apparently if you get enough cool upgrades, you can put a custom paint job on them that makes it look like a Super Soaker from the 1990s. So, yeah.
That sounds fucking fantastic. I was driving the other day, and somebody drove by me in this like little sedan that was painted on the sides to look like a shark, like a really swoopy shark.
Cool.
And I felt so much intense jealousy. It was like that first day of school where you get in and like you open up like last year's Trapper Keeper, but the kid next to you has this year's Trapper Keeper. And you're just like, I actually thought I liked my Trapper Keeper, but now I just like want to throw it in a mud hole.
Well, maybe people out there who have been following my musical pursuits prior to this podcast know I have a big thing for custom vans with airbrush paint jobs on the side. So yeah, that appeals to me a lot. Like basically, if you have a vehicle with some sort of fanciful painting on the side of it, you're automatically like, I want to be friends with you, especially if it involves a wizard or like a naked robot babe flying through space on a flying V.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most important things about van art is that is one of the only contributions America has actually made to world culture. Near as I can figure out, it's like blues and jazz.
Which, you know, questionably, because most of that came from a heavy influence from the African diaspora.
Very true.
Yeah.
But, you know, still happened on this continent.
Yeah.
Blue jeans.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And van art.
That's true.
I genuinely don't know of any others.
Wow. Man, that's tough. You're right. So I'm going to stick with van art, which is, incredible. Like, definitely wizards shooting things out of their fingertips.
Yeah.
I mean, especially like in the 80s when the custom van craze was going on, there were even some really questionable movies about vans that involved like really cool vans that, had like wet bars in the back and shag carpeting and stuff. So I love the world of custom vans. And if I ever have a ton of money, I'm going to buy myself like a 1970s Tropic Traveler and deck that motherfucker out. So just be ready.
Jay, get out of my dreams and stay out of my van.
I'm just saying, if you ever see a van driving down the street with a IDEOTVPod logo on the side, wave me down because I probably got a snifter of brandy in the back for you.
Yeah, a snifter of fine Swedish brandy.
Exactly.
Like we all like a lot.
Or aquavit, which is mentioned so many times throughout this book, and I don't know what the fuck it is.
Yeah, like every country has their own like weird indigenous liquor that's
and
like
they're all weird versions of how do you say anise? Like sambuca, kind of like licoricey tasting bullshit. Oh, I fucking hate it. Keep it away from me.
I'm told that there's a version of that like the Croatian version of that is actually interesting. Then again, I really like mezcal, and the mezcal I particularly like is the mezcal that tastes most like paint thinner. So
yeah, you earlier were talking about America's contributions to the world, and you've just made me think of one. Bourbon. There we go.
There you go. Or as I call it, bad whiskey.
Oh, shut up.
Come at me. Okay, here's another letter. This one is similar to the last one.
Which, now that I think about it, bourbon is spelled like a French word. I'm sure it didn't originate here. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, but it has corn, and corn's North American continent.
But if it was
right?
American, it would
Or
be
American
spelled like
continent only.
BURBIN.
That's a really fair point.
We don't deal with doubled up vowels here in America, so...
Jesus. This is just a very funny comment to me, but I can understand if it would rub another of us slightly the wrong way.
Oh, Jesus.
This is from Kylan Colmalt, no last name, or perhaps a fake last name, but there's just nothing after that one long-ass word that I just mispronounced. And it says only, "This is the wrongest you've ever been. Love the show."
Oh, that was about Starship Troopers, wasn't it?
I'm going to guess that it was.
I think that was the one time I've used the block feature on our actual show account. And I admit that I had several things to drink, and then I went back and unblocked later. But I'm guessing that was about the Patreon episode where I said that Starship Troopers was actually not good satire. So.
Yeah, so all of this, sorry for the letters. We love these letters too. I was supposed to bring some physical letters today, which I remembered roughly 10/12 of the way here and yelled in my little car, "Fuck!"
No.
Because I forgot. But,
it's fine. I got to make some room for some more stuff anyway, so we're all good.
But we love all the letters, slightly less the letters where people say that we're wrong or that we're not handsome or other things.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get unblocked, which I'm pretty sure I already did because I realized that was just in a fit of drunken rage. But what you could do is write back in and be like, "This is the wrongest you've ever been. But Jay, you are quite dashing."
Yeah, exactly.
You remind me of a younger Dustin Hoffman.
Ooh. And a less creepy one at that. So if you do want to write us, you can do so at I don't even own a television, all one word, no punctuation, no underscores, at gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter at IDEOTVPod. You can find us on Facebook at IDEOTVPod as well. Linked from that page, you can find our exceptionally fun group, the Fun Time Party Pit,
where people mostly post pictures of crabs, but that's okay because crabs are awesome.
Crabs are awesome. There's been a hilarious thread because we're at 2 books in a row now where people's everyday carry choices have played prominent roles. So this makes me happy.
Yeah.
I know Jay is a little less interested, but you know what? There's plenty of material there. Even if you're not interested in crabs or people's bags, there's something there for you in that group.
If you'd like to see, a photo of my new spring-assisted fucking pocket knife,
Yes.
it's right there. I'll never use it for anything except for cutting up boxes to fit in the recycling bin, but man, it looks cool.
And this episode, like all of our episodes, is brought to you in part by our friends over on Patreon. That's patreon.com/IDEOTVPod. Thank you so much to everybody who helps us out. Bonus episode coming soon.
Very soon.
It's about written material.
Ooh, not even a movie.
Not even a movie. And I have reason to think you're going to get a kick out of it.
I think you might be willing to go to bat for it, it will.
I think you're going to be saying, boy, this one's fun.
Oh man, we just were sowing the seeds of love there. I do want to say also too, I think both of us have kind of made it a priority to try to figure out how to get more content out to Patreon subscribers at lower levels. So we're going to be doing a lot more kind of stuff in the future with just kind of extra dramatic readings, just weird little shit. So, if you enjoy the show, even if you can only afford like $1 a month or whatever, we're going to try to make it worth your while because
you'll get stuff nobody else does.
Yeah. We appreciate your patronage. But of course, if you can't contribute, we just appreciate you listening. But make sure, if you enjoy the show, rate and review on iTunes, because we've been on iTunes for almost 5 years now. And one of the first reviews that still comes up is from some fucking asshole who's mad that we were not providing legitimate literary criticism. And that still bugs me so much. So let's knock that fucker right out of the ranks, please.
Yeah.
Rate and review. Let's get rid of that asshole.
I mean, I can't follow that with anything but let's get crabby on that guy.
Ooh, let's do it. So if you enjoy the show, hop on iTunes, 5 stars, rate and review us, and also ride that damn crab.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
The magic dragon lived by the sea and frolicked in the autumn mist in a land called Honolulu. Little Jackie Paper loved that rascal Puff and brought him strings and sealing wax and other fancy stuff. Oh, Puff the magic dragon lived by the sea and frolicked in the autumn mist in a land called